Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio. And now, here's our host, Dr. Vanessa Anceloni.
Welcome to the Nourishing of Our Souls. Today we're talking about near-death experiences, a true phenomenon, a phenomenon that has happened since ancient times. Oh yes. Let us go to the New Testament, John chapter 11. We talk about Lazarus. We talk about Jesus raising the dead Lazarus. But the question is, was he truly dead? Is it possible that once we're dead, we can go back to the flesh? Who can explain us this? Science and Spiritism. So this is the reason why we're here today, to talk about true phenomenon of life, experiences that can change our lives. How many people were accounted to be dead, and then they came back, and they tell stories about their encounters with loved ones in the beyond. Not only that, but they talk about their experience with their inner selves. People who are transformed by this encounter with themselves in the afterlife. And we are honored to have here with us Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. He is the pioneer in the research of near-death experiences. He's also the best-selling author of the book Life After Life that sold more than 13 million copies. He is an award-winning author, and he is a renowned scholar and researcher in this topic. He's a physician. He also helps people by training them and counseling on grieving. And he has done so much. He has done so much to humanity. And today he's going to be in our show in a few minutes so we can understand much more about these experiences that bring to us the awareness that life goes on. And life is much more than this. But is it possible? So if we go to the Spirits book by Allan Kardec, in the chapter that talks about emancipation of the soul, which is chapter 8 of second part, we're going to see three main questions about the occasions in which lethargy, catalepsy, and apparent death happens. And Kardec asked these questions to the illuminated spirits through the mediums of the time, and the answers were quite amazing. Cases such as the one with Lazarus. He was apparently dead, or quite dead, apparently, to the description that was given. And then, by a touch of Jesus, he came back to life. How is that possible? And how is it possible, like Allan Kardec said, that these people who are apparently dead, they can see and hear through the time that they are not there? They come back and they say, "Hey doc, I remember you were here talking to the nurse about this, and that." And said, "No way, because at that time you were considered dead." How is that possible? Well, Spiritism tells in question 422, the spirits answer, well, these perceptions are of the soul, and the soul is conscious but unable to communicate through the body because the body prevents it. The organs are blocking that communication. And then in the next question, we get to know that actually, though they were medically dead, Spiritism says, well, the body is not dead, and vitality in some way and form still exists. And then, let's pay attention to this. When an apparently dead person comes back to life, it is because death has not actually been consummated. But is it possible for somebody who is living life be back to life if we put some form of attention? This is question 424 of the Spirits book, From Allan Kardec to the Spirits. And they say, yes, of course, you have evidence of this every day. In such cases, magnetism is often a powerful means because it gives the body the vital fluid needed to keep its organs functioning. Well, this is a lot of food for thought, for sure. A lot to think about, a lot to discuss, a lot of get to know, and especially about the reality of ourselves. This show about near-death experiences is about the evidences in life that we have that life goes on. And to open this show with grace and harmony, we're going to play this beautiful inspirational prayer message of Emmanuel through the mediumistic writing of Chico Xavier. It's entitled Omnipotent Love, and it's track 8 of the CD, Enlightening Messages, published by the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. By the way, go to the Spiritist Society of Baltimore online, our bookstore, www.ssbaltimore.org/bookstore, and you can buy the CD. Listen to this beautiful prayer.
Omnipotent love. At the distressful time of crisis in which circumstances took your soul into trial, many believed that you would no longer rise. However, when shadows thickened around you, you found the blinding light, which impelled you toward the path of hope bathed in sunlight. In the cell of disease, many admitted that nothing was left for you but to accept the scythe of death. However, at the extreme moments, intangible hands caressed the exhausted body, renewing its warmth, so that you would not leave incomplete the service that marks your presence on earth. In the midst of temptation, many agreed that decadence was all that was left for you. However, at the edge of the muddy cliff where you were, an invisible arm manifested itself, deterring you. In the valley in which you threw yourself without thinking, many despised you for good. Nevertheless, at the threshold of madness, you received inner support that guarded your heart, reconstructing your life. In the hut of loneliness, in which the most cherished relatives relegated you, many believed you to be forlorn. But at the end of your weeping, which appeared to be endless for you, you experienced an unexplainable uplift that encouraged you to seek new bonds which honored you. While in the midst of turmoil that envelops you during the day, think about God, the omnipotent love, which does not forsake us. No matter how great the affliction, He will bring a balm that consoles. No matter how obscure the problem, He will give a fair and correct solution. Even so, do not hasten in personifying or defining Him. The word of Christ is enough for us. He who revealed God is our Father. Above all, do not bother if someone denies God's existence, even if their words shine in the world, because you will find God within your heart in moments of pain. It is natural that it be like that. It is when the night comes that the eyes of humanity can devise the splendor of the stars.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And by the way, this is the voice of our friend Greg Stewart. By the way, Greg, if you're there listening to us, remember, we still need your help. There's so much to do in Spiritism, and projects such as this between the SSB and Greg Stewart were beautiful. They opened opportunities for so many people around the world to get in touch with materials like this. and many others. Go to the Baltimore bookstore, the SSB bookstore, www.ssbaltimore.org/bookstore, and you're going to find beautiful CDs such as the one we just talked about, Enlightening Messages, many messages brought in by Chico Xavier. And today we're talking about the fact that life may go on. Yes, it does. So is it possible that somebody is dead and they come back to life? How does science, how does medicine, when does medicine tell us that we are clinically dead? And what happens in this near-death experience occurrences? Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. is going to be with us in a few minutes sharing lots about his research, his observations, interesting accounts. You know, he was here in 2006 talking to the Spiritist Society of Baltimore community. Actually, there were people even from Brazil, Oceano Vieira from Versátil Editora, and others recording his amazing lecture on an event that we had with Divaldo Franco and Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. Very interesting. One of the CDs that we have, and it's there for us. You know, if you want to call and talk to Dr. Raymond Moody Jr., ask a question through Kardec Radio. Kardec Radio is open live for you right now. If you call 858-769-4705, you can ask a question to Dr. Moody Jr. about the show on near-death experiences, and he's here with us. Let us give a short break, and we'll be back with you and our guest, Dr. Raymond Moody Jr.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio. Eternal Bonds of Love is a poignant account of a young man's afterlife experiences after his death at age 20. Ricardo passed after an accidental fall at college on September 18, 2005. He started communicating through written messages to his father on July 2006. In July 2007, he communicated to his parents that they would be writing a book together to be finished and published in 1 year's time. And so they did. You will find in this unusual book Ricardo's story about his experiences, feelings, emotions, and spiritual development in the first 2 years after his untimely and unexpected passing. Eternal Bonds of Love is comforting, hopeful, and inspiring, and teaches us that true love has no boundaries, no limits, that time and space are illusions, and that love binds us together eternally wherever we are. Purchase this book by visiting the SSB online bookstore at www.ssbaltimore.org.
Join us every Thursday live, Evolution in Two Worlds, a journey of the soul through the teachings of the Spirit Doctor, Andrea Luiz. Connect at www.tvcei.com, Channel 2.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Enrich your spiritual senses and deepen your foundations of Spiritism with the book, What is Spiritism? By Allan Kardec. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
And now we return to our program.
Dear listener, it's about near-death experiences, and we are here with Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. He is this best-selling author who has been selling more than 13 million copies of this book, Life After Life, and also books such as Reunions, talking about near-death experience and also about the encounter with loved ones in the beyond. but he's a researcher. He's a scientist. He's a physician. He comes from the medical perspective to tell us what it signifies. Is it possible that somebody is dead and they come back to life? We talked about the case of Lazarus in John 11. And is it possible that we are dead and then we come back? What does science tell us in that regard? What can he tell us in regard to, is this possible that there is a life after this one? So Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. is here with us. And thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Moody Jr. Welcome to Kardec Radio.
Thank you so much for having me on your program. I'm just honored and delighted.
Thank you. We had this beautiful event with you years ago, right?
In Baltimore, I think.
Exactly. And we were delighted. We had people even coming from other states and even from out of the country to see you and listen and learn from you. So, and we've been missing you, so that's why we called you back into the Spiritist community.
For doing it. I had a wonderful time at that program, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Moody Jr. So, Dr. Raymond, tell us about, when does science or medicine tell us that somebody's clinically dead?
Well, one problem with that is that the textbook definition of it stays the same, in the sense that death is the state that you don't get back from, right? The final, irreversible cessation of life. But on the other hand, the criterion for that is always changing, because many people now who would have, by the standards of 100 years ago, been declared dead and sent to the morgue are now resuscitated. So there's that middle zone where we really don't know exactly how to define it, I think, especially with the increasing technology of being able to bring people back from more and more severe states. So that's in flux, but I think what we do know is that when people do come close to death, many of them have astonishing spiritual experiences which change their lives totally. And I've had the privilege since about 1965 of being able to talk with thousands of people like that from all over the world who tell an astonishing story of what happened to them when, from the point of view of their physicians, they were dead.
So, Dr. Moody, would you say that science, we still need more sensitive equipment or other parameters to define better when a person is clinically dead? Or is there something else that is occurring that science hasn't touched yet, and that's one of the reasons why they are considered dead, but in actuality they aren't?
Well, what I think is, first of all, as I think you know, it's only an illusion that this is a new phenomenon, and all of Western thought got started because of the interest of the early Greek philosophers in these cases of people who were believed to have died and returned. And in the ancient Greek philosophy, they called these people the revenants, or the people who had returned from the dead. And I think it's the question with which Western thought began, and then in the last 50 years or so, I think what's happened is that we've developed techniques of resuscitation that enable us to bring many, many more people back from that state between life and death. And so that now these experiences are much more common than they were in the world of antiquity, but there is still the same experience. You can read the stories of this in the writings of of Plato, for example, and Democritus, and you get pretty much the same story. What I think has to change is I don't think necessarily any new equipment is going to do us much good. I think this is something in a way that defies science as we currently have it. But science always grows, and I think that these kinds of experiences will be one thing that causes science to grow. And in the meantime, I think the most important development will not be in machinery or measuring techniques, but rather in reformatting our own minds to think about this kind of thing more clearly and more logically. I think that's where the real advance in the next few years of this will come. But I think that we are on the verge of getting genuine rational enlightenment about the question of life after death.
That's so interesting. So when you started focusing your attention on near-death experiences and researching on it, and you brought it to life in a more broader perspective with the book on life after life, how did that happen? How did you get interested in that first? And then second, do you think people now are more open to the discussion than when you released the book decades ago?
Mm-hmm. Well, the way I got interested in it was in reading about it in Plato's Republic in 1962. I was a philosophy major at the University of Virginia, and I had never had any interest in the question of an afterlife. It didn't seem to me an idea that was even coherent. And I was actually interested in astronomy in childhood and in philosophy. And then when I read Plato's discussion of life after death, I was convinced by his argument that this is the most important question that faces us as human beings. And then that was in 1962 when I found out about these experiences. And then 3 years later, in 1965, I heard an experience from a living human being, Dr. George Ritchie, who was a professor of psychiatry at the University of Virginia, where I was. Mm-hmm. And when I heard Dr. Ritchie's story, I knew it was something that was more than something pertaining to ancient Greece, but that it was a factor even in the modern world. And so from that point, I just started collecting cases, and by about 1973, I had hundreds or a couple of hundred cases, and so I was giving lectures on it to the medical school where I was a medical student at that time, and heard a lot of these stories from my professors and so on. And then, based on one of the articles that was about this in the newspaper, a publisher contacted me and asked me to write the book. So I did in 1974, and it was published in 1975. And to my utter surprise, it was huge, attracted a lot of interest. And you ask whether people are more receptive to this now. Yes, I do think they are. In the sense that the accumulated information on it now is so vast that nobody can deny that it really happens to people. The discussion now centers more on not on whether it happens to people. That's, I think, established. But the question now is how to interpret it. And what we find is that some people look at this and they say that this is plainly brain damage, in effect, that as these people come close to death, the oxygen flow to their brain is compromised so the brain throws up this hallucinatory phenomenon, and the trouble with that kind of objection is that by and large, I find that the people who make that kind of objection are mostly just armchair speculators. They don't really get out and actually talk to people who've been through this. They just read about it or whatever, and then they come up with some theory which fits in with what they think they know. But I think the biggest trouble with that kind of perspective is that this same experience of getting out of the body and seeing a light, and very often seeing the relatives of a deceased person come, occur not just to people who almost die and get resuscitated, but identically this same phenomenon occurs quite frequently to bystanders at the bedside of a dying loved one, that they report that as their loved one in the bed passed away, the bystanders themselves all have these experiences, which also occur to people who get resuscitated after a close call with death. And these shared death experiences, or empathic death experiences, have every feature that we have identified in connection with the near-death experience, including, incidentally, this panoramic review of the life. I've had quite a number of cases over the years of people who tell me that as they were there with their relative who passed away, that they empathically co-lived this panoramic life review that people experience who have near-death experiences. And so my point here being that the bystanders are not ill or injured. There's not any compromised blood flow to their brain, and yet they have identically the same experience as those who almost die and return. And so therefore, in my mind, there's nothing to the neurophysiological or biochemical explanations of this. We're dealing with, I think, something very different and very important. I think that when this finally comes to light as to what this is, I think that this has the potential of changing our society in a very real way.
How so?
Well, I think that all the time you hear people say things like that if we could know for sure in a rational way that there's a life after death, then that society would change, and that people would that everything would be okay. I don't know whether that's true or not, but one thing I absolutely do know is that the process of a rational proof of a life after death would inherently change the whole nature of the human mind. If we could achieve a rational proof of life after death, the human mind itself would not be the same anymore. David Hume, the great skeptic, Scottish skeptic, who, to date him for, he lived from 1711 to 1776, and he pointed out that a proof of life after death would require an entirely new logic, and he said some new faculties of the mind that they could enable us to comprehend that logic. Well, for a long time that seemed like an impossible conditions, but I don't think so at all. I think that Hume's criterion can be met and has been met, and that so I think what we will see is a whole change in our cognitive structure as human beings in connection with rational proof of life after death. And also, since people invariably come out of this experience, no matter what they had been chasing before, whether all the things people chase, knowledge in my case, or power or fame or money or any of these other things. But when people come back from these near-death experiences, they tell us that what they learned is that the most important thing we can do while we're alive here is to learn how to love. And I think that too will have an impression on people, that if when there is rational proof of this, I think people will be sort of forced in a way to try to change their ways. It's very difficult, though. Even people with profound near-death experiences who have this vision of the importance of love nonetheless say that even when they come back from this experience, it's hard to put that into practice on a daily basis, because you do tend to fly off the handle and say things to people you wish you hadn't have, and so on.
That's so interesting, Dr. Moody Jr. So we would say what most people who have these experiences, they see like a tunnel, a light, and then the reunion with loved ones. So overall, would you say that majority have a positive experience?
Yes, they do. They certainly do. And there have been various kinds of attempts to estimate the frequency of the negative experiences. But the negative experiences, although they occur, seem to be very rare. And they're also much more varied. For the more positive ones tend to be homogeneous, that is, very much alike, whereas the ones where people report something negative have a lot of variation, and there are three major categories of them. And some people say that they experience the typical things that happen to other people who come close to death, but rather than experiencing it as something pleasant, they experience it as negative or as frightening. Then a second group are people who say that their experience first starts like that, negative, and they're fearful, but then it transforms into the typical positive experience. And the third category of the negative ones, and the rarest of all, incidentally, are ones in which people see specific hellish imagery. And because they are so rare, it's hard to study them. Obviously, it's something. It's easier to study something where you can get high numbers than it is to study something where you can only get a few cases of it. So, but generally speaking, all the studies that have been done that are serious, well-done systematic studies seem to tell us that the negative ones are quite rare.
That's so interesting. Dr. Moody Jr., the question, let's go back to that interesting observation you made about the people who were accompanying the ones who were in the hospital bed, for example. They were considered dead, and then they had similar experiences. So hypothesis-wise, where would that perception or that experience, in Spiritism we call it emancipation of the soul, the fact that we can, detach somewhat from the physical body, not completely though, and experience these perception of the spiritual realm and come back and tell it. So from your perspective, how would that be possible? If you said as well that they don't need an impaired physiology to have such experiences, so then where does it come from?
Wow, that's exactly what I would like to know too. And I think that, incidentally, I'm not trying to promote a book, but just in case our listeners are interested in this, I have published recently a book called Glimpses of Eternity, where I describe in detail the cases of these shared death experiences or empathic death experiences that I have gathered, and that is through Guidepost Books. So in case people are wondering, that information does exist in book form. And I think the question you raised is right on. That is the issue here. Where are these things coming from? In Western society, which is kind of dominated in a way by scientism, it's a very plausible thing on a superficial level for people to look at all these near-death experiences and say, well, that could be the oxygen flow is compromised to the brain, so that creates a hallucinatory disturbance in the brain and so on. And on the superficial level, that seems plausible, and it also keeps people from having to think further, if you think about it. And it's a sad thing, but nonetheless true, that many Americans just don't like to think. There's something about our society that does that to people. They just want people to give them the answers or whatever. And so I think that the fact that there's a rough and ready explanation of the near-death experiences in terms of the neurophysiological things, it gives people an excuse not to have to think about it. But now that we know with a certainty that all of those things that we think of as a near-death experience also occur to the bystanders who are not ill or injured, that raises the very question that you put in such an articulate way. Where is this coming from? And that is the mystery. That is the mystery. Personally, I think that we're not at the stage yet where we can go on and just say that this is cinched as a rational proof. I think that will be a little while in coming. But so I can't say to you as a person with a PhD in philosophy and an MD degree in psychiatry training, that kind of background doesn't give me the competence to be able to go on and make the judgment that this proves it. However, in the last couple of years, I've reached the point where I try to monitor what's going on in myself pretty closely. And what I realized a couple of years ago was that when I would try to think my way out of this, in other words, when I would try to figure out any other hypothesis other than that there does seem to be a life after death, then I would catch myself just trying to run away or to rationalize rather than just to go ahead and say straightforwardly what seems to be. And what seems to me to be is that there is life after death, which is astonishing to me because, incidentally, I was not raised a religious person. My dad was he was a surgeon, actually, a medical doctor, and a World War II veteran from the Pacific Theater, and he was a medic in the Pacific Theater in World War II, and I'm sure saw horrible things, and just was not a religious person, and I did not grow up with an idea of an afterlife. And so because of that, it took a long time for it to dawn on me that, in my opinion, this is real. There does seem to be life after death.
Yeah, Dr. Raymond Moody, so good to talk to you. As you said, our community at Kardec Radio, as far as we know from the profile that we got, it's already in more than 45 countries in less than 3 months. From the emails we've got, the messages, the calls, they are interested in getting to know more about these things because they agree. It may change our lives, at least at the cognitive level. It may transform our lives. So we're going to give a short break and be right back with you to get to know more about these observations and research you have been doing. We'll be right back.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
Kardec Radio, live every Saturday at 11 a.m.
Nourish your soul with Kardec Radio.
Now in English, the book And Life Goes On by the Spirit André Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Spread the word. Kardec Radio, to learn more about Spiritism.
The Spiritist Magazine is a trimestral digital periodical that publishes the latest news on the Spiritist thought and the movement in the USA and worldwide. Subscribe now at www.spiritistmagazine.com.
Come and listen to our CD, Unfolding Our Spiritual Nature, Path of Harmony, by Dr. Raul Teixeira. The CD has questions and answers on euthanasia, suicide, pain relief, past life therapy, prayer and better attunement, law and affinity, the spirit world, raising our thoughts, and much more. You can purchase the CD by visiting SSB Online Bookstore at www.ssbaltimore.org.
And now we return to our program.
Dear Kardec Radio listener, did you know that at this very moment, Kardec Radio is for the first time at the Baltimore Book Festival in the area of the George Washington Monument in Baltimore City. Yeah, George Washington Monument was first in Baltimore, and then the obelisk was brought into D.C. But anyhow, Kardec Radio is there, the Spiritist Magazine, through the sponsorship of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. We have the Spiritist books there, so you have somebody in the area of Baltimore City, tell them it's a 3-day festival. It started yesterday, and it's going to end tomorrow at 7 p.m. And tomorrow we'll be in this special program sponsored by the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center in New York, the third Forum of New York, Spiritist Forum of New York. It's entitled It's Good to Be Good. We're going to be there giving talks about autistic kids, about the afterlife, and a special guest, Dr. Stephen Post, will be there to talk about his research on It's Good to Be Good. It's going to start at 2 p.m., and you can go to the website of the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center to get to know more about the event. It's going to be in a facility nearby the United Nations. Go to their website, Mount Vernon Spiritist Center, mvsc.org, and get to know more about it. We are here in a show about near-death experiences, and we are honored to have with us Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. with his beautiful philosophical insights and also a more medical and practical perspective to raise our awareness about our true nature. It's very likely from the medical perspective that we're more than the physical body, though, as he said, we need a lot more research to bring evidences. And if you want to get to know more about the much beautiful work he has been doing throughout the decades, these last decades, you go to his website, www.lifeafterlife.com. He has books from the first one, Life After Life, 2 reunions, many more, and the latest, Glimpses of Eternity. Did you know that people who are connected, if they are nearby, patients who were clinically diagnosed to be dead and were resuscitated or came back to life, the people who were accompanying them also have similar experiences? Yes, read his book, Glimpses of Eternity, and you'll get to know more. Dr. Moody, You also give training about grieving. So when you talk about near-death experiences, we have also people who felt the distress of having their loved ones, gone by those experiences or the actual death. And then you engaged into grieving counseling and training people to be good at grieving counseling as well. Can you share with us this experience about how can somebody grieve well and healthy, if that's a possibility?
Well, of course, as we all know, everybody grieves in their own way. But I think personally, I've been doing grief counseling, I guess, now for about 41 years. And from that experience, it seems to me that the most important thing that people can do is to talk about it. There's some people who, when somebody dies that they love, they don't want to talk about it because it's too painful to talk, or because they're afraid that they will be embarrassed by the things they're experiencing, or they just may feel that they don't want to burden other people with their miseries and so on. But I think the most important thing we can do in a grief is to talk about it. And once you do, I think you find out that everybody is going through, almost everybody who's a certain age is going through some kind of grief. So everybody will have their own words to add, and that's very helpful to share the pain with others, and it helps people, I think, to help someone who is grieving. It helps the helper as well, because then they get to talk about their losses and so on. And from the very beginning of rational research into life after death, which took place with the ancient Greeks, even Plato, in his work on the rational inquiry into life after death, just plain says that you can't separate the goal of consolation from the rational inquiry into life after death. That the reason people started studying life after death from a rational point of view was to give us comfort in the face of a loss of a loved one to death, or and comfort in the context of anxiety about our own death. And so I think those two things go hand in hand. The consolation function of this kind of inquiry cannot really be dismissed. Over the years, I've lectured on this subject. I guess thousands of places. I mean, just endless lectures and so on. And even in scientific meetings or medical meetings, there's always that aspect that people are looking for consolation in this kind of material. And I think that's a legitimate function of this kind of inquiry as well. I mean, it's unavoidable, really. You can't, even though it's supposedly an intellectual quest or a rational quest to find out the truth about life after death, deep down the motivation is always that we're seeking consolation in the face of our fears and our grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this is very inherently consoling to people, that when you lose a loved one to death, to hear this information about how people who almost die say that they had these beautiful experiences which changed their lives totally, and that's very good news for people who are grieving.
Exactly, and it's all about consolation, as you said. Dr. Moody, we're going to play like 3.5 minutes of an excerpt from one of Allan Kardec's books, Heaven and Hell, in which a Russian doctor who passed away, comes back to share a little bit of his experience, and then we'll go back with you to discuss about the case of Daniel Brinkley.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so let's listen to this excerpt of the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec.
A Russian physician. Mr. P. was a physician from Moscow, as distinguished for his eminent moral qualities as he was for his knowledge. The individual who invoked him knew him only by reputation, but had not had any direct relationship with him. The original communication was given in Russian. After the invocation.
Are you here?
Yes, on the day of my death I came to you, but you resisted all my attempts to get you to write. I heard what you said about me, and that enabled me to become acquainted with you. Then I had the desire to converse with you and to be useful.
Since you were such an upright individual, why did you suffer so much?
It was an act of grace from the Lord, who in such a manner wanted to enable me to advance as much as possible while on that world, and to enable me to feel the value of my final deliverance from it.
Did the thought of death frighten you?
No, I had too much faith in God for that.
Was the separation process difficult?
No, what you would call my last moment was nothing. I only felt a very quick jolt, and soon afterward found myself very happy at having become disencumbered by my miserable carcass.
Then what happened?
I had the fortune of seeing a large number of friends who had come to meet me and welcome me, especially those whom I had had the satisfaction of helping.
What region are you in? Are you in some planet?
Surrounding the planets, there is what you call space. That is where I am. But how many gradations there are in this immensity, men have no idea. How many rungs there are on this Jacob's ladder that goes from earth up to heaven, that is, from the abasement of incarnation on a lower world such as yours, up to the complete purification of the soul. One does not come to where I am now except after many trials, meaning many incarnations.
So you must have had many existences.
How could it be otherwise? There are no exceptions to the immutable order set by God. The reward can only be given after victory has been won in the struggle. And when the reward is large, it necessarily means that the struggle must have been considerable too. But human life is so short that the struggle is fulfilled only in stages, and such stages are the many successive existences. Now that I am on a higher rung, it is obvious that I have attained this happiness through a succession of battles in which God sometimes allowed me victory.
What does your happiness consist of?
That is more difficult to explain. The happiness I'm experiencing is an extreme self-contentment, not as a result of my merits, which would be pride, and pride is a mark of backward spirits, but a contentment that entails being immersed in God's love and the realization of His infinite goodness. It is the profound joy of seeing the right and the good, of being able to say, perhaps I have contributed to the betterment of a few individuals who have lifted themselves up to the Lord. I feel as though I am one with happiness. It is a sort of fusion between the Spirit and the divine good. I have the gift of seeing the purest spirits, of understanding their missions, and knowing that I will also attain that state.
So in this case, we see the Russian doctor telling us, of course, in this case, he departed to the spirit realm and came back to tell us. And Dr. Moody, in regard to that, it's about the description of the afterlife, possibility of cities, colonies, and not only reunions with the loved ones, but even beyond, like the casing of Daniel Brinkley. When I'm not sure the public is acquainted with the case, so in case you want to describe a little bit. And then the fact that he had this near-death experience, came back to talk about this Crystal City and some predictions, and you became very close to one another, collaborated. This is actually a question from Adriano Barbo, who is the president of the Mount Vernon Spiritist Center, and he wanted to know more about the accounts that you have received from people just like Dannion Brinkley.
Well, I would be interested to know what you think of Dannion Brinkley, because I personally don't put much stock in his stories. Dannion is a little bit of a fabricator in many ways.
Oh.
But the person that I really can attest for absolutely, I think, that gave a really wonderful account was the first person I ever heard of speak of this is Dr. George Ritchie, who wrote a wonderful book called Ordered to Return. And he is the first person I ever heard describe this cities of light, as it's called. And George said that and incidentally, George Ritchie, a professor of psychiatry at UVA, was actually observed as being without a heartbeat for 9 minutes. He was pronounced dead of double lobar pneumonia, but they don't know how long he had been in this state of cardiac arrest before then. So he had an extremely lengthy cardiac arrest, and he saw the cities of light that you describe. And he said people who go through this say that there are no words that we can use to describe this, that it seems that a city, an entire civilization that is composed of sheer light. But people say that you can say light or you can say love, and it doesn't matter which way people say it, that there is a magnificence there that just defies our feeble ability as human beings to put it into words. And I hear this from quite a number of people over the years have told me of the cities of light. Yes.
And as you said before, these accounts, to say the least, they can bring consolation to people who are grieving or who are experiencing those final moments of agony themselves, and probably are marching to the final moments in this life. So, to say the least, right?
Absolutely, yes. Generally speaking, the people who talk about these cities of light are the people who have the most lengthy cardiac arrests. That it's only people whose cardiac arrests have gone on for such long periods of time that it's hard to imagine how they lived. And those are the ones who tell us that they see these cities in which every being seems to be a being of complete love and compassion.
So in that regard, we became curious about the fact that is there a form of, could we categorize the forms in which people are experiencing, physically speaking, the kinds of pathology that they have and the types of experiences in regard to the near-death accounts? Is there a way, like you said, the more related to the cardiac issues and the types of experiences or the types of reunions that they have in the afterlife? Is there such a thing, a categorization of the physical pathology? Yeah?
There is to a degree. One thing we do know, however, is that whether or not a person has a near-death experience doesn't seem to depend on what particular cause it was that brought them close to death. For example, whether it was a a traumatic injury or an infection or a cardiac arrest or incident of childbirth, whatever, we have that same kind of we have that same kind of experience. But what does seem to be a pattern is that the closer a person gets to death, the more complex and complicated their experiences become. For example, in a whole experience, in a complete experience, people say that they get out of their body and they go upward and they go through a tunnel into a beautiful light and they meet their relatives who have passed away and they see their entire life in a holographic panoramic review. And the ones who have extremely lengthy cardiac arrests say that they actually see these cities of light, beautiful cities that are composed entirely of sheer loving light. And what seems to happen is that people who come, say they have a momentary cardiac arrest, they are more likely to tell you just of leaving their body and maybe going part way through this tunnel. Whereas if the cardiac arrest lasts, say, further than that, they may go on through this tunnel and meet their relatives, whereas only the ones with extremely lengthy cardiac arrest get this entire picture, which is interesting, you see, because if this had been some sort of physiological response, you would expect the experience to get more incoherent as the time goes on, whereas in reality what we see is the reverse, that the longer that a person is in this state of cardiac arrest, the more complicated and involved their experience becomes. And I think that is another thing that is just very difficult to explain on ordinary neurophysiological terms.
And it reminds me, as we're talking about this, the complexity and the depth of these experiences and the possibility of categorizing the psychosomatic, meaning of such experiences as well, even for near-death experiences. Because, for example, in some cases, even in the Spiritist community, like the medium Divaldo Franco, whom you met and had an event together with him, he had his near-death experience after a heart attack, and when he came back, he described the whole thing and saying that the actual enlightening spirits gave him, as if we could call it, a moratorium. It's like an extra time because accordingly to his information, maybe it was supposed to be over, and then they gave him an extra time for him to be on this reincarnation. Do other people, patients of yours, people who shared accounts with you, also describe things of this nature to you?
Yes, I've had cases where people say that, for example, they were given a choice, that they were told either that they could go back to the life they had been leading or they could continue with this experience. So it doesn't seem to be necessarily written in stone that somebody is going to die at a certain time, that during this time of the near-death experience, some kind of decision is made to come back, whereas the people were given a choice. And incidentally, when they are given a choice and they choose to return, and the cases I've listened to, they all say essentially the same thing, and that is that for themselves they would rather have stayed in that light. But they chose to return, and the reason they typically give is that they had young children left to raise. That's what they almost always say.
Mostly, yes. And In Divaldo Franco's case, it wasn't that different either, because we know he has an amazing foundation, many children to take care of at the time. He adopted more than 600 people, so it matches somewhat what you're describing us. And in that regard, today, the people, like for example, in the medical field who have been working on this, do you think our the training, what type of training is on near-death experience? Do medical students actually, after your great contribution, now have some form in the universities in the U.S. Of training on near-death experiences and what to do and how to, in the psychological or psychiatric perspective, help them and patients deal with the contents that they bring about?
I think that, yes, there is a little bit of that. I have lectured at various medical schools around the country, as have my other medical colleagues who study near-death experiences, have done some of this with medical students and so on. And also there have been numerous articles published in medical journals now about this phenomenon. So there is much greater awareness of it in the medical community. And at the same time, there is just such a vast amount of information that a medical student has to absorb in the 4 years of medical training of medical school, that I think this is not something that would be I think high on the list of a medical faculty to inform students about. And in other words, there wouldn't be a whole course on it or anything like that. And yet, it is something that is very clinically relevant, because any doctor who works in critical care medicine, for example, is going to have patients who have this experience. So it is an important thing for medical students to get to learn about. And yet, at the same time, it's just one of vast body of knowledge that they have to absorb in those 4 years. But yes, there has been more awareness of this in the medical community, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. And we have here with us Christina Mello, she belongs to the Cardiac Radio team. She is helping us screening the call. She has talked to a few callers already, and she also wants to ask you a question, because as a nurse in critical care, she has experiences of the nature. Hi, Kirsten. Thank you for being with us.
Sure. Thank
Hello.
you for having me. Hi, Dr. Moody. It's good talking
Hello.
to you again. Like Vanessa said, I am a nurse in the critical care area, and I have been for a number of years. I work in the ICU. My question for you is, and I'm always interested in people who believe in things of this nature, how they deal with other people who don't. So how do you deal with people who are contrary or against what you believe or don't believe in it? How do you deal with them? What is your approach either in the medical field or in psychology, when you have colleagues who sort of might think that, pardon the expression, but a quack, and think, oh, well, we don't believe in those types of things. How do you address it? Because sometimes I have to be quite creative when I deal with physicians and other colleagues in my field who do not in any way believe in life after death. What is your approach?
Well, I think I'm fascinated, and when I first started talking about the whole issue of near-death experiences and so on was in about 1970, when I was a professor of philosophy at East Carolina University, and I began to hear these things from my students. And then I was a philosophy professor for 3 years, and then I went on to medical school. And I hear all the time stories like, oh, poor Dr. Moody was persecuted by the medical community, that he, they tried to drum him out of the medical profession or whatever, and that's a very nice story in a way. I mean, as my wife says, I do have a little bit of a martyr complex, so and in a way, so you almost wish that story were true, but the reality is that it was entirely otherwise. That I had been investigating near-death experiences for some time when I started medical school in 1972, and I had friends in the medical school that I had grown up with, and by the time I came in September of 72, they had spread the word among the faculty that the student was coming in September who had studied this. And in the first 2 weeks I was in medical school, 8 professors approached me and told me either their own stories or talked to me about patients that they had who had this experience. So I think, it seems to me a lot more, I don't think it has so much to do with whether a person is a doctor or not, but rather, more than anything else, it has to do with what sort of personality someone has. And the reality is that there's a certain kind of personality. Some people just don't want to have to say, I don't know. So they will go through all sorts of rigmaroles and maybe even get defensive or even angry about it when when something comes up which contradicts their what they think they know. And then on the other hand, there are people who have an easy time saying I don't know and are curious, and I see it divided more along those lines, that incredibly there are some people that once they get a PhD or an MD, they want knowledge to stop at that point. And then there are other kinds of people who just enjoy the flow of inquiry and to investigate new things. So I think that it's more than being a medical professional, it has to do with the personality of people. I've known many, many physicians who have been very moved by stories that they've heard from their own patients, and there are other people who are fearful. They have some sort of worldview that this just it threatens their worldview or so whatever, so they just choose not to listen. And what we're basically dealing with here is fear. And when I first started doing all this, I once in a while you would get a response from somebody like that, and people with a very fundamentalist religion or something, where only the people in my denomination gets to go to heaven, and so if somebody almost died and came back and had this story, well, there's something wrong with it. And I used to really get kind of, what is going on with these people? And I finally realized, what that is fear. And so I can't fault them for that. I mean, some people are just afraid to say, I don't know. I am not afraid to say, I don't know, but I am afraid, for example, to drive an automobile. I've never been any good at driving, and I haven't driven a car for 20 years, and once in a while I have a dream in the middle of the night that, oh my God, I'm driving a car, and this is terrible and terrifying to me. Well, a lot of the fundamentalists probably wouldn't think a moment about driving a car, but they're afraid of saying, I don't know. I mean, we human beings are all, we all have some fear or another. And I think the people that you're dealing with, basically, they're just fearful. And that abrasiveness that they may project, or the know-it-all attitude, it's not just in the study of near-death experiences that we have to deal with that. It's in the whole range, I think, of any kind of new information that comes in. But whatever anybody's fear might be, or however reluctant some people in the medical or whatever other community may be to acknowledge this. The fact is that what we're talking about here is a reality. It's not going to go away, no matter how much it irritates anybody to have to deal with it. They better, at some point everybody's going to have to deal with it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Moody. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten, for this question. And it brings so much calmness, Dr. Moody, when you explain things this way. Even next week you said, everybody has fear. So next week we're going to bring Dr. Pillai from Harvard to talk about how we can overcome fears through the power of visualization. But as you said, it seems also to be that currently people are more open, maybe because of the advancements of science overall, or because
that's
right?
one thing. And I think that there's something else too, and that because of this, of how common this resuscitation technology is now, and how rapidly the resuscitation technology is advancing, we've reached a point of now where if somebody hears about these near-death experiences and they're talking in it in a group, and they're saying, I heard about these experiences, I don't believe it. Well, the likelihood now is that there will be somebody right there in that group who can speak up and say, well, I almost died, and I'll tell you what happened to me. So it's getting increasingly difficult, for people to avoid this because, 100 years ago, if somebody had this, well, he wouldn't have much social support. But nowadays it's happening so frequently to people that anytime anybody raises the question, there will be somebody in the vicinity who can talk about it personally. So I think that's one thing that's happening. Eventually society is just going to have to come to terms with this because, like it or not, this is a reality.
Mm-hmm. You're right. It's inevitable. It's about life, right, Dr. Moody?
Yes, about life. About life. This is, I think that these experiences are going to have. I think that we're dealing with something that does have profound social and spiritual implications for humanity.
And Dr. Moody, when you talked about the grieving counseling, it occurred to me also that though some of us may be spiritists or spiritual people, still many of us are not aware on how to approach somebody who is dead. For example, even as spiritists, we believe in the afterlife. Even us who are mediums, we know we see the spirits, we talk to them. But when somebody experiences the loss of a loved one, sometimes we're brutal. Saying, don't cry for them because, they're okay. And these are two separate events that should be treated in a different manner, right?
Absolutely. I think it's important to realize that even if you know with certainty that there's a life after death, that doesn't mean that you're not going to grieve for somebody you lose. I hear this from people all the time who have near-death experiences who say that after their near-death experience, they found that grieving was a much more acute process for them. And let me explain. If you have a belief in life after death, and that's all it is, in other words, you have a belief because of your faith or just something that's in your head as a belief, then you can use that as a rationalization for not crying and so on. In other words, Grandma died, but I have this faith that she's alive, so I'm not going to grieve and I'm not going to cry. But a person who has a near-death experience, to them it's no longer a matter of something that they have as a belief or an abstraction. It's something that occurred to them and is a reality that they can't deny. And so what they tend to say is that now I grieve even more because I realize that they're okay, but I still miss them. And that's what the grieving is all about. It's not thinking that the person is annihilated. You can be absolutely sure in your mind that they are still okay and alive on the other side, but you grieve for them because you miss them. They're no longer here. I think that's basically what it is.
Yes, it makes so much sense. Dr. Moody, we're going to give one more break, and then we're going to hear the second part also of that description of the Russian doctor in the afterlife, and be back with you because we have callers who want to ask you a question as well.
Great.
We will return to our program after these messages.
Now in English, the book Missionaries of the Light by the Spirit Andrea Luis, psychographed by Chico Xavier. Buy your copy online or via your ebook reader. Go to www.ediceiofamerica.com today.
Nourish Your Soul with Kardec Radio.
Spiritist Network, your gateway to on-demand Spiritist videos. www.spiritistnetwork.com.
Join the Third Spiritist Forum of New York on September 25th. The theme is, It is Good to Be Good, featuring the keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Post, renowned and leading scientist on compassion and health, as well as Dr. Petrillo and Dr. Saloni. More information at www.nvscenter.org. That is www.nvscenter.org.
And now we return to our program.
We're here with Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. talking about near-death experiences, the consolation that it can bring to our lives, and the much research that still awaits to bring more evidences. But the reality is that, many more people have brought accounts of the afterlife, not only those who almost died, but those who actually departed to the spiritual realm and came back through mediums, such as the Russian doctor, whom in the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec, which is a fascinating book, talks about different types of spirits. The mind of Allan Kardec, we would say, just like Dr. Raymond Moody Jr., in that philosophical questioning, that inquiry, it's all the time asking questions. And Allan Kardec brought to us and publishing these amazing books, from the Spirit's book to Heaven and Hell. And Heaven and Hell Part 2 has different accounts. The Russian doctor came back to explain his experiences in the afterlife. He said he met loved ones, and now let's listen to more of this experience in the afterlife.
In the incommensurable infinite, I can glimpse regions so resplendent with the divine fire that they dazzle me when I contemplate them through the veil still covering them. But what am I saying? Can you comprehend my words? That fire of which I speak, do you believe that it is like the fire of the sun, for example? No. It is something inexpressible to men. For words express objects only, physical or metaphysical matters about which they have a memory or an intuition. But since they have no memory whatsoever of what is completely unknown to them, they have no words available that can enable them to perceive it. However, know that it is already an immense joy in thinking that we can evolve forever.
So you were so kind as to state that you wanted to be of some use to me. In what way, may I ask?
I can help you in your moments of disencouragement, strengthen you in your weakness, and console you in your sorrows. If your faith is shaken by some kind of trouble and you feel perplexed, call me. God will give me the words needed to remind you of Him and lead you back to Him. If you feel ready to succumb under the weight of tendencies that your conscience feels are incorrect, call me. I will help you bear your cross just as Jesus was helped to bear his, the cross which mightily proclaims truth and charity. If you weaken under the weight of your sorrows, if despair seizes you, call me. I will come to lift you out of the abyss, speaking spirit to spirit, reminding you of the duties imposed on you, not because of societal or material considerations, but because of the love that you will sense in me, the love that God has dispensed to my being in order to transmit it to those whom he can save. Of course, you have friends on earth. Perhaps they have shared in your troubles. Perhaps they have already saved you on occasion. During times of affliction, you seek them out, and you take your regrets and tears to them, and in exchange they give you proof of their affection through their counsels, support, and tenderness. Well then, don't you think that a friend here might also be a good thing? Isn't it consoling to be able to say, when I die, my friends on earth will be at my deathbed praying and weeping for me, but my friends in space will be at the threshold of my new life and will come smiling to greet me and lead me to the place that I have merited by my virtue.
Why have I deserved the protection you want to give me?
Because I have felt an attachment to you since the day of my death. I have seen you as a spiritist, a good medium, and a sincere adherent among all those I left below. I perceived you first, so I have decided to contribute to your progress, not only in your own interest, but in the interest of all whom you have called to the path of the truth. You can see that God loves you so much that he has made you a missionary. All those about you will gradually share in your beliefs. Even the most rebellious will at least listen to you. And one day you will see that they too will believe. Do not give up. Always press forward, despite the obstacles along the way. Take me as your support if you feel discouraged.
I wouldn't dare believe myself worthy of such a big favor.
You are obviously far from perfection, but your ardor in spreading good teachings, your sustaining of the faith of those who hear you, your proclamation of charity, goodness, and benevolence, even when someone does not behave properly toward you, your resistance to the impulses of anger that you could easily give in to against those who afflict or belittle your intentions, all these attributes fortunately act as a counterweight to the evil still in you. And know that forgiveness of offenses is a powerful mitigating force against evil. God has covered you with his grace through the faculty he has given you, and it is up to you to develop it through your own efforts in order to work effectively for the salvation of your neighbor. I am leaving you for now, but you can count on me. Try to moderate your earthly ideas and live more frequently with your friends on this side. Background music by Kevin MacLeod.
Dear listeners, this is the account of the Russian doctor in the book Heaven and Hell by Allan Kardec. And here we have Dr. Moody. Once in the event with Divaldo Franco in 2006 in Baltimore, Maryland, when you were talking about From Grief to Hope, Divaldo Franco shared with us this tip from his mentor, Joana de Angelis, the spirit guide. She said, because life is, to date, inevitable, we all know sooner or later it's going to happen to us, then it's healthy and therapeutic to think about, for the consequences it has in the afterlife, to think about it at least once a day, not in a morbid way, but as a way for us to take the most of life. Would you say from your experience, especially the accounts of near-death experiences, that it would be important to think about the fact that we're all going to die sooner or later? Would that also change our lives?
Oh, yes. I think that's absolutely correct. And incidentally, Plato in his Phaedo said exactly that same thing. He said that we ought to constantly repeat to ourselves that there is a life after death, as a way, he said, of preparing ourselves for the vicissitudes of life. And so, in that sense, the notion of an afterlife almost used as an incantation, he says, to help us with our confidence. And absolutely, that's a very, very well-known philosophical position in addition to the source that you mentioned. So absolutely, yes.
You're talking about Plato. It occurred to us that, in the introduction of the book Gospel According to Spiritism by Allan Kardec, he places Plato as this forerunner of these universal spiritual thoughts, as one of them that you just mentioned. So maybe in a future show we could bring you back so you could introduce, because many spiritists I know, when they read that part, they're like, really? Because they are not aware, they are not acquainted with the profundity of Plato's thoughts in that regard. So maybe you could come back in a future show and tell us more about
I
these
would love
sides.
to do that. I would love to do that. I'm now 67 years old, and I have been studying Plato constantly since 1962. I think that he is... since I was 18 years old. So
you could teach us more about it.
I would love to do that.
That will be great. So, Dr. Moody, we have here Dr. Yasco Arakawa, who is a listener of Kardec Radio, and she would like to ask you a question in regard to the topic we're studying and learning from you today. Hi, Yasco. Thank you for being with us.
Hello, Dr. Moody. Thank you for taking my call.
You're welcome.
It's good to talk with you.
Yes. In the Spiritism, we have this notion that during long illness, the patient has opportunity to go to the spiritual realm a couple of times to have counseling. So I would say they're more prepared to die. And also, on the other hand, those that are caught in a death, in an incident of a very painful crime or whatever it is, they suffer some more traumatic experience. So my question is, if you had the opportunity to compare those two types of patients, if their near-death experience would be somehow different, more negative or whatever, more confusing among those caught in a more sudden, unprepared death.
I don't know. That's a very difficult question to investigate because, we don't typically get to talk with, the great villains of history are few and far between. So I just don't know. I think that one thing I would say is that the general drift that people come back from these experiences with is that God is a much more loving and forgiving figure than most of us realize in our thinking about God. And at the same time, there is an aspect of reality in which you do that, for example, in these life reviews, people say that when they see themselves doing each action of their life, when the action has its consequence, they are embedded in the consciousness of the person with whom they interacted. And hence, if you see yourself in this panoramic review doing an unkind or mean-spirited act to one of your fellow human beings, then in this panorama, you yourself experience the sadness and the hurt directly that you have brought about in the lives of others. So that's, I think, something that we all need to keep in mind.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Yasko, for this question as well. So much to think about, right, Dr. Moody?
Yeah.
And, we are in these final moments of this encounter with you, knowing that, we shall bring you back to know more about these universal concepts on spirituality that Plato brought to us so widely in the past. And even as Spiritists, we read that part of the Gospel according to Spiritism, or like, really? Socrates and Plato, they were talking about these things before, and we're
Oh, yes, absolutely.
It's so interesting. So what would you tell, your final considerations for today for our listener in regard to the much you have got to know through near-death, the research on near-death experiences, and also the observations that came from grief counseling and so forth?
The main lesson to me has been that I do think my considered thought is that this reality that we're in now is a very temporary thing, and that the reality has more to do with the other side, that this life that we're leading is a temporary phenomenon, and it seems to be geared to our education and to learning how to love, and also, and I say this not at all flippantly, but also a certain amount of entertainment value to it. I mean, life is itself an interesting and fascinating and entertaining kind of experience. And the closest I can reach to an assessment of what this is that we're in, this world, is that I think that this is God's educational and entertainment medium. And I mean that quite seriously. I think that this reality that we're in is only temporary, and that this is a reflection of something far more profound that we will learn about when we die.
Yeah, it's about the cave and the shadows and the actual life, the real one, right, Dr. Moody?
Oh, yes, yes.
There's so much to learn from you. Dr. Moody, we're so deeply grateful for your time, for sharing so much with us.
Oh, my goodness, I'm grateful to you, and I've always been so grateful to your organization, the times that I have been with you all, and I just express my deep appreciation to your group.
Thank you. Dr. Moody, here's the invitation. Please come back to the show so you can tell us more about these great insights of Plato in terms of spirituality, our spiritual nature, and, hopefully we can bring you back to the area of, now we have a center in Virginia as well, the Spirit Society of Virginia, so the Baltimore, Washington, Virginia area, to learn more from you in regard to that as well. So thank you for being with us. And
thank you very much.
Thank you. So, dear listener, we're talking with Dr. Raymond Moody Jr. here. Go back, listen to it, because this show is going to be there on demand at KardecRadio.com. You can go back, share these news with your family and friends, because, we need to think about life. Death is a part of life, because actually life goes on. And our relatives, as ourselves, we all will experience this sooner or later. We have already done it in the previous lives, so it's not something totally new to us, though fear may still be there. So listen to Dr. Moody. Read his books. Go to his website, lifeafterlife.com. His latest book, Glimpses of Eternity, invites us to new thinking, that the reality is that not only those who have a physical challenge and are brought into this experience of the greater perception of life in the afterlife, but also those who are connected to them. Read the book, Glimpses of Eternity, and get to know more about the possibilities in life. And to wrap up the show, we're going to bring to you a reflection by the Spirit Anderson, who brought this message through the medium Chico Xavier on July 7th, 1965, when he was in New York City. It's entitled Life After Life, Chapter 37 of the book Among Brothers of Other Lands, and you can get this book at Amazon.com. He says, not all persons are given the wisdom, but all do have the gift to testify through our daily experiences the love to each other. In truth, our social condition, color or race, age or nationality do not prevent us from the duty to serve. We're challenged to do good things at all times. God is love. Nobody is all good and nobody is all bad. Each of us is self-centered on a course of development to reach a higher plane of activities. God has enshrined His divine attributes within us. As one goes higher, evolution is expressed by the world, equilibrium, love, and light. Let us be progressive with Jesus. How can we do this? Service first. Spiritual refinement is man's soul experience. Life after life, over and over again, our present awareness extends over an extended period of the past. The area of experience varies from man to man. Each human being only exists in the place for which he has fitted himself. Nobody can evade that which is in his own consciousness. Actually, there is no death. As we live in our earthly body, our life continues in the beyond according to our thought. Therefore, we come back to the physical world through rebirth to conquer greater perfection till we get complete command of our impulses and functions. Now, dear listener, we invite you to a deep moment of service. We can now, as we pray, to those who agonize and are about to depart or even experience near-death experiences, they can get a good hold of a prayer to help them in this transition. If you go to the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 28, Allan Kardec shares with us representative prayers so we can relieve our hearts, bring consolation. And this one is in items 57 and 58. They are prayers for those who are agonizing, because agonizing is a prelude to the separation of the soul from the body. It can be said that at this moment the person has one foot on earth and the other in the next world. Sometimes in this phase we feel pain, and the pain can be for those who are mostly attached to the possessions of the world. So prayer is a good remedy. Let us pray for those who are agonizing right now. As it says, merciful and omnipotent God, here's a soul who is about to leave its terrestrial covering in order to return to the spirit world, which is the real homeland. May it be given to them to make this passing in peace, and may you extend your mercy to them. And thus, good spirits who have accompanied this person on earth, do not abandon them at this supreme moment. Give them strength to support the last sufferings which they need to pass through in this world, for the good of their future advancement. Inspire them to use any last glimmerings of intelligence or any fleeting awareness they may have to the consecration of possible repentance for any faults. Allow our thoughts to act in such a way so as to help them achieve this separation with less difficulty, and may this soul take the consolation of hope with it at the moment of departure from this earth. Dear listener, let us send our big hug also to Dr. Raymond Moody Jr., because we're so grateful to him for his long-standing collaboration to humanity in bringing awareness on the fact that we are here in the flesh, but there's so much more about life. Near-death experiences research has brought to us a new understanding about our minds as well. So we send him our deepest gratitude, and to Dr. Ricci in the afterlife, so he knows we are so grateful to his inspiration to Dr. Moody and all of us, and all the people who have been contributing to the research in that regard. Dear listener, next week we invite you to come back, because we all have fears. As Dr. Moody said, that's why next week we're going to dedicate the show to techniques in which we can overcome our fears. Dr. Srini Pillai from Harvard University is going to be here with us, sharing how we can do it through the technique of visualization. Science can tell us how visualizations can be so empowering. Come back to us Saturday at 11 a.m. May God bless us all.
Thank you for listening to Kardec Radio, broadcasting live every Saturday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Email us and share your comments at www.kardecradio.com. Until next time, we wish you many blessings.